Hi, my name is Gabrielle Egan, and I watched the movie Room, which was directed by Lenny Abrahamson and written by Emma Donoghue in 2015. So, Room tells the story of a mother and her 5-year-old boy who are being held captive by Old Nick. The mother, also known as Ma, has been locked up for 7 years. Ma was captured when she was younger by Old Nick, who lured her in to help him find his missing dog. Old Nick is the father of Jack. Jack is the 5-year-old who lives in the room with Ma. He knows nothing but room, which is what they lived in, which was also known as a shed. Jack has never seen the outside world. In the beginning of Jack's life, Ma was scared to teach Jack anything other than room and the things he saw on TV. The only thing Jack could look out was the window at the top of the shed, and everything was pretty soundproof inside the shed as well. Every night, Old Nick came into the shed and raped Ma. Jack would hide in the closet so he did not see what was going on. Ma knew she had to let this happen so Nick would continue bringing their necessities such as food and the vitamins for Jack and so forth. Ma begins teaching Jack at a certain age about everything there is in the outside world because she had the idea that he could escape the shed, otherwise known as room, and get them help. Ma taught everything about how to escape and what the plan was going to be. For this escape to happen, Jack pretends to be dead from not receiving medical treatment. Ma rolls Jack up into a carpet so Old Nick will take him outside and supposedly dump him somewhere. Jack is taught that when the car stops, he is to unroll himself in the trunk and jump out. When Jack opened his eyes in the trunk of the truck, he was shocked with what he was seeing. It was like he could not believe that he was in the outside world, considering he has never been in it. So when Jack finally unrolls himself from the carpet, he jumps out of the truck. Old Nick stops the car and tries grabbing him when he runs, but ends up giving up and leaving him when a pedestrian kind of asks what is going on and that he's going to call 911. The police show up and track down Ma from Jack kind of remembering little stuff here and there to help them. Once Ma is released home from the hospital with Jack, there is a ton of reporters not leaving them alone at the house, as well as it goes through Ma's mental health and everything she was experiencing after being captured for 7 years. One scenario was when Ma was put through an interview. The interviewer was making Ma seem like the offender and not the victim for not letting Jack out earlier in his life and kind of making him live in the room with her. The media was basically trying to figure everything they could for their viewers and not really think about Ma and Jack in that situation. So this story was based off of Joseph Fritzl. He is a serial rapist and an indirect murderer of his daughter, Elizabeth. Elizabeth was his daughter that he locked up in the basement of their own house. Elizabeth one day ran away from home with a friend, but was later returned. To keep Elizabeth isolated, her dad began building a dungeon in the basement with no windows, and it had an electrical door, so there was really no way to escape. One day, her dad kind of brought her downstairs saying he needed help with something, and Elizabeth was drugged and then pulled into the cell door. The family had no clue that this was going on below them. For the first year of Elizabeth's captivity, she was restrained and was not able to move around within the cell. So to cover up that his daughter was missing, he forced her to write letters to the family explaining how she moved in with a friend, and if they came looking for her or sent police after her, that she would flee the country. So that was her dad's way of kind of being like, don't look for her, she's fine. For 24 years, he would give her food every 3 days, and that was really the only thing she received. After Elizabeth birthed the first three children of hers and Joseph's, he decided to make the cell bigger to fit the bigger family that was growing in the basement. Elizabeth ended up having 7 children with her father. So the lives of Elizabeth and her children changed on April 19th, 2008. This was when Kirsten, her firstborn daughter, got sick in the dungeon, and Elizabeth had to beg her dad to take Kirsten to the hospital. Once Kirsten was taken to the hospital, Elizabeth then begged her father to take her to see her child. Joseph listened to her and took her to the hospital, and that was when the hospital realized something suspicious was going on, and the hospital tipped police. Police showed up and arrested Fritzl. He was put on trial for incest, coercion, rape, false imprisonment, enslavement, and negligent homicide, which this was the homicide of Michael, the twin who died after birth, the son of Elizabeth. So now the Hollywoods of this film. The Fritzl story shocked the writer Emma Donoghue of Room because she had a similar experience with her son. Donoghue explains it as she was triggered by the Fritzl case. Both cases involved a mother and children. The children from both stories hadn't seen the outside world because they were born in either the basement or room. The children were the ones that saved these individuals and the families from the horrible circumstances they were living in. The film is different from the Fritzl situation because there was only one child involved in Room, whereas the basement had a total of 7 children. The victim in the Fritzl story was held captive by her father, whereas in Room, Ma was taken hostage by a stranger who lured her in one day while on a walk home when she was a young girl. The situations the young girl and their children were put in the room and the basement were very similar. Both victims, known as Ma and Elizabeth, suffered immensely with mental illness and the whole idea of no daylight. The movie The Room really focused on the mental health that Ma needed help with after being found. It really showed the troublesome life she kind of lived after, and there were a few times where she tried committing suicide. So it kind of showed that, like, even though there was the happy ending of them being found, like, life was still not all that good after because of all the trauma she had lived through, and they kind of had to teach Jack how to live a whole new life at an actual house with a family and with pets and so forth. So the family showed the sensitivities that Ma and Jack endured after being found, like I said earlier, the mental health and the medical aspect. In both stories, the children were too young to understand what was going on because Jack never really saw harm in Room, which was the shed he lived in. Once he was found, there were a couple times when he asked to go back to Room, and Ma actually did end up taking Jack back to the shed, and he was really sad seeing half of the stuff taken for evidence and forth. He saw it basically as a safe place. Elizabeth's children were born in the room as well, and that was all they knew. In both stories, the media was seen as a big disturbance, not leaving their families alone and invading their privacy after being found. Overall, I actually really enjoyed this movie, and I would recommend it to anyone. And thank you for listening.